where the mind is without fear, and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action. Into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake.
Hello everybody, welcome to my channel Let's Study Together. Today we will be studying about the poem Where the Mind is Without Fear by Rabindranath Tagore. It is an important poem and we will be discussing about the theme, the critical appreciation, the summary, the theme and everything that includes the poem to be so important. So without wasting much time, let's directly start analyzing the poem. Before listening to the audio, please subscribe my channel and hit the notification bell for more audios. Where the Mind is Without Fear was included in the volume called Naibedya. The poem is a prayer to God to protect the nation from evil effects. It is a prayer to the Almighty for a nation free from any kind of manipulative or corrupt powers. This poem is a reflection of the poet's good and ideal nature. Before starting the poem, we would like to discuss about the theme. What is the main theme of Where the Mind is Without Fear? The theme of Where the Mind is Without Fear by Rabindranath Tagore is a freedom from colonization and what it takes to achieve that. Tagore lived in India during British Crown rule of the country. Britain ruled in India from 1858 until 1947. Tagore was born in 1861 and he was died in 1941. The poem Where the Mind is Without Fear by Rabindranath Tagore is a prayer to God. The special feature of the poem is the emotion it conveys and the strong feelings of the poet for the progress of the country. The poet in Where the Mind is Without Fear has described reason or logical thinking as a clear stream that can wash away the stagnant heap of superstition and dead habits. Indeed, good rational thinking is what can clear out mind all of evil, of prejudice, and can lead into nation's progress. There are some metaphors which are used in this poem. Clear stream of reason, narrow domestic wall, and dreary desert sand of dead habits are some examples of metaphors that are used in this poem. Let us discuss about the favorite line in the poem. The poem is written in a free verse without any rhyme scheme or meter throughout the poem. There are many figures of speeches, example personifications, like where tireless striving stretches its arm towards perfection. This is my favorite line of the poem, where the mind is without fear and held is held high. In the poem, Where the Mind is Without Fear, it is written by Rabindranath Tagore as we have discussed earlier. The poet addresses to his father. By father, he does not mean to the one he was born to. The father referred to here is God. He asks God to have India and the Indian people from colonizations of British. Most common question while analyzing this poem is where the mind is without fear, find any two examples of alliteration from the poem. Alliteration is the occurrence of the same letter or sound at the beginning of adjacent or closely connected word. Example, where the mind is without fear, head is held high, not been broken, striving stretches, dreary desert sand of dead habit. In this poem, the author also shows his patriotic feeling by voicing his wishes for his country and his future. His first wish is for his country to be a place where the mind is without fear and the head is held high. In this poem, the figure of speech is metaphor because reason has been compared to a clear stream. The sound of letter D is repeated for poetic effect. Like here, mind part stands for citizen, that is in full. A figure of speech occurs when a word or group of words have a meaning beyond the literal. In the case of Tagore's poem, figure of speech includes the following metaphors and personifications. Where the mind is without fear and head is held high. Head held high is figurative. It means to assume a proud posture. While writing this poem, poet has used poetic devices which are alliterations, metaphors, apostrophes, personifications, syncope, and many more. This poem comprises of three table contents. First is the central idea, then is the summary of the poem, and then is the reading that continues. Now we shall discuss about the central idea of the poem. Where the mind is without fear is a thought-provoking poem. It is a Nobel laureate by Rabindranath Tagore. He was an Indian writer. Tagore is a poet. He is a dramatist and often referred to as the Bard of Bengal. Do you know? It is one of the best poem in the anthology called Gitanjali, which was published in 1912 and won the prestigious Nobel Prize for Literature in 1913. When Tagore composed this poem, his mind was confined with the chains of slavery, like any other common citizen of India, because India was under the clutch of British rule, where freedom was like a daydreaming. Now, this poem is written in the form of prayer to God, the true bearer of freedom. He urges God throughout the poem with his mysterious concept of freedom from the struggle of awakening to his countrymen. The poem, Where the Mind is Without Fear, is a pre-independent poem in which the poet sincerely urges to God to awake his fellow beings for the realization that the essential need to live in a free and united country. He wants his countrymen to awake and enjoy the life of full dignity and honor. His countrymen would not be superstitious or believers of blind faith, rather than they would lead the life of enlightened and educated. Poet wishes to the people to be honest, open-minded and industrious. Then only they would stretch their arm towards perfection and the nation can actually achieve the apex of success. They need to use their reasons over their blind faith and must be ready to accept new thoughts and ideas. He requests God to free his country from manipulation, corruption, and slavery. He yearns for an awakened country where there would be freedom of mind and expression of ideas. The poem invokes the deep patriotic feeling. Our country is subjugated by caste, creed, superstitions, beliefs, and biased ideas. Now Tagore earnestly appeals to God that a country would be where people's head is high and knowledge is free. He prays for his country would not be divided and fragmented into pieces due to their narrow thoughts. They should express their words not from the mind but from the depth of truth and heart. He urges God to guide his countrymen for moral awakening, to fight for their rights against British inhuman rules, liberate them from the fear of oppression, repression, and subjugation, unshackle the chains of fear, and direct them to the path of progress and prosperity. They should be confident, not confined. There would not be injustice and inequality in the country on the basis of caste, creed, and gender. Countrymen should be unprejudiced and open minded, accepting the new challenges and changes. They should lead their lives of decency and dignity. So, here in this poem, where the mind is without fear, Rabindranath Tagore reveals his personal quest for the divine and characterized by a variety of original themes both in his thoughts and in his expressions. Therefore, this poem is remarkable to a great extent, which expresses the intensity of the feeling of freedom. His poem is universal in its appeal and invasion, the heaven of freedom and happier future for mankind. It's time to read the beautiful poem, and after that we shall move to the line by line explanation of the poem. Where the Mind is Without Fear by Rabindranath Tagore. Where the mind is without fear and head is held high, when knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arm towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sands of diet habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever widening thoughts of actions, into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. Now, in the very first line, the poet prays to Almighty that his countrymen should be free from any fear of oppression or forced compulsions. It is his wish, or rather he wishes, that everyone in his country has his head held in high dignity. In other words, according to him, in a truly free country, every person should be fearless and should have a sense of self-dignity. In the second line of Where the Mind is Without Fear, the poet dreams of a nation where knowledge would be free. Education should not be restricted to the upper class only, but everybody should be allowed to acquire knowledge. Not only that, the children should learn freely from the nature and wood around them. They should not be forced to memorize some predetermined lessons. And this is Tagore's typical conceptions of education. In the third and fourth line, the poet emphasizes the unity of not only of his countrymen but also of the entire world. He thinks there should be no division among people based on their caste, creed, color, religion, or other baseless superstitions. In other words, prejudice and superstitions should not be divided the people in groups and break their unity. In the fifth line of Where the Mind is Without Fear, Tagore wants a nation where people are truthful, that they should not be superficial, and words should come out from the depth of their hearts. In the sixth line of the poem, the poet wants everyone to work hard to reach their goal and in the long run to reach perfection. He thinks they should not be tired by working, people should not be lazy and ignoring their work. Next, in the seventh line, the poet compares reason or logical thinking to be a clear stream, and in the next line, he compares dead habits or superstitious beliefs to a dreary desert. He wants the stream of reason not lose its way into the deserts of prejudices. In short, people's thought should be monitored by rational thinking, not by superstition or logic should rule over old baseless beliefs. In the ninth and the 10th line, the poet wishes his countrymen to be progressive and broad minded. He wants that their minds are led forward to ever widening thought and action by the Almighty. In short, we should be open minded and do something unusual or extraordinary to overcome the narrowness of minds. In the final line of the poem, the poet addresses the god as Father. He asks him to awaken his country into such a heaven of freedom where the above conditions meet. To make it clear, the poet prays to the Almighty, like he addresses my Father, to raise or lift, that is, to awake his country to such a height where freedom would be realized at its best. That would be a heaven of freedom. In turn, he actually is praying to God that let God awaken his countrymen so that they come out of from the darkness of ignorance, prejudice, disunity, and all other evils. Here, a great addition from our reader. It is to awaken the God within us, to free our mind from the shackle of bondages. It is not invoking God but using it as a metaphor for the higher self within us. Okay, so this interpretation is beautiful and we can't resist the urge to add it here. Lastly, the poet's message. Finally, in the poem, the poet's message is very clear. If all the people of the nation are not wise enough to lead a happy and peaceful life, free from all evils, they cannot enjoy their freedom well. So, to the poet, only political freedom is not so important unless you are fearless, self dignified, knowledgeable, truthful, hardworking, and broad minded enough to enjoy it fully. Now from this beautiful piece, there are lots of questions that comes during examination. I would like to discuss some questions, but if you need the answer, you can comment below for more audios for the question and answer series. So I would jump into the question and I would give the list of questions that generally come while discussing this poem. First question that would be, where the mind is without fear, what is broken into fragments and how? What has been broken up into fragments according to the poet in the poem Where the Mind is Without Fear by Rabindranath Tagore? Next question. What should the word we speak reflect as stated in the poem Where the Mind is Without Fear by Rabindranath Tagore? What does the poet mean by domestic in narrow domestic walls in the poem Where the Mind is Without Fear? How does Rabindranath Tagore describe reason in his poem Where the Mind is Without Fear? Which figure of speech is used in the line where the tireless striving stretches its arm towards perfection? Give the substance, central idea or theme of the poem Where the Mind is Without Fear by Rabindranath Tagore. Next is, what was the poet's purpose of writing the poem Where the Mind is Without Fear? Or what is the poet's vision in this poem? Or what could have inspired the poet to write this poem? Next question. What is the main idea or topic in Rabindranath Tagore's poem Where the Mind is Without Fear, and in which part of the poem is the idea to be found? Next question. Comment on the form and style of the poem Where the Mind is Without Fear by Rabindranath Tagore. Next question. What does the poet wish for in the poem Where the Mind is Without Fear? Next question. What does the poet mean by head is held high in Where the Mind is Without Fear? Does where the head is held high mean that the head of the countrymen were held low? Is the poem Where the Mind is Without Fear a sonnet? Comment on the form and style of the poem. So these were few questions that generally abbreviate from the poem Where the Mind is Without Fear by Rabindranath Tagore. If you have liked the explanations and the detailed variations in the poem that have been used, please comment, like and subscribe my channel.